Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're diving deep today into five really crucial insights from today's sources. It covers a lot of ground, from massive shifts in the global economy right down to the very local fight for urban fiscal justice here in India. Our mission, like always, is to give you the clearest, most valuable takeaways. Okay, first up, let's try to unpack this seismic shift happening in the global economic order. The sources are describing a major power conflict, right, fundamentally between the U.S. and China.
Yeah, and it's carving out these new geoeconomic ecosystems designed, it seems, purely for self-interest. It goes way beyond just, simple trade disputes.
Exactly.
And what's really fascinating is how the source material breaks down these new economic paradigms. The first big structural change they point to is the rise of what's called the state capital Gordian knot.
A Gordian knot. Sounds complex.
It is. Picture this, like an inextricable, almost destructive alliance.
Yeah.
Populist autocrats prioritizing huge oligopolies, crony capitalists, often mortgaging national assets, twisting policies just to benefit specific corporate interests.
So we're seeing a return to older, maybe even primordial rules of statecraft because of this state power and crony capital links.
Seems like it.
How is America recalibrating then? Its whole strategic approach over the last century. How is it changing to meet this?
Well, the sources detail some very specific strategic moves. The U.S. is aggressively pressuring key allies, like pushing Taiwan to shift critical chip manufacturing to the U.S. mainland.
Right, the semiconductor issue.
Exactly. And securing vital trade routes, Panama is mentioned specifically, fortifying supply lines for rare earth minerals, looking at Central Asia, Africa.
Anticipating China might weaponize its dominance there.
Precisely. And the sources also point out this fusion of foreign policy with finance, with digital ecosystems.
How so?
Well, digital currency ecosystems are being used strategically. Pakistan is cited as one example. And the article brings up this really sharp, frankly unsettling concept: ecological imperialism.
Ecological imperialism.
Yeah, mainly regarding Arctic Rim nations. Think Greenland, Canada.
Yeah.
As global powers basically vie for control over resources that are, becoming exposed because of climate change.
Wow. That leads straight into the role of big tech, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Digital colonialism, the Cloud Act, weaponizing the SWIFT system. It's all mentioned. And on the flip side, you have 100 central banks piloting state-backed digital currencies?
Yeah.
What's the big consequence there?
Well, they might promise streamlined cross-border transactions, sure, but the warning is serious. They could undermine the economic sovereignty of smaller nation-states.
Wow.
Critically, these systems can dilute global anti-money laundering norms, the whole FATF framework. That opens up huge avenues for illicit finance, for corruption.
Complexities that populist leaders could exploit.
Perfectly positioned to exploit them for political gain, yes.
And we also have to talk about the human cost in all this restructuring.
Yeah.
The source mentions developmental aid cuts a huge $44 billion cut by G7 nations. What does that kind of withdrawal mean?
It's potentially devastating. The calculation mentioned is that these cuts might push another 5.7 million Africans into extreme poverty by 2026.
That's staggering.
It is. And this environment, this instability, it forces the Global South to scramble for alternatives. They're localizing production, trying to secure their own supply chains, exploring de-dollarization, often by ramping up gold reserves.
So for India, in the midst of all this uncertainty, what's the opportunity?
The opportunity, as laid out, is really to champion a kind of new economic deal. Advocate for a radical overhaul of international financial institutions, make them fairer, more representative.
And domestically.
Domestically, India needs a fundamental recalibration. That means the state taking a more decisive, commanding role in critical sectors. Think energy, defense.
Okay.
And instituting sovereign wealth funds, Norway's model, is mentioned to ensure national assets aren't just handed over to, oligopolistic control.
Okay, moving from those global power shifts, let's zoom in. India's ambitions versus global reality, especially on critical minerals for clean energy. We're talking about that huge 500 GW renewable target by 2030.
Right, and that needs vast amounts of lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements, REs.
So how exposed is India in this race?
The source is, brutally clear. India relies on imports for nearly 100% of its lithium, cobalt, and nickel, over 90% for REs.
Wow, almost total dependence.
It's a massive vulnerability, especially when you consider China controls something like 60% of global RE production and, crucially, 85% of the processing capacity.
Now, there was that discovery last year, right? The 5.9 million tons of inferred lithium in J&K. That sounded promising.
Promising, yes. But despite that potential, India currently contributes less than 1% of global RE production. So we're still very much at the exploration stage, not production.
Exploration is just the start.
Exactly. The article really stresses the urgent need to rapidly build the actual processing and refining capacity, and that needs effective public-private partnerships.
And looking at the bigger picture.
Domestically, mining only contributed about 2.5% to India's GDP in 2022. Compare that to Australia, 13.0%. That gap just shows the scale of structural investment needed to even be competitive.
Okay, so the government launched the National Critical Mineral Mission, the NCMM. There's a 34,300 crore plan. But beyond just the funding, what actually needs to happen?
Deep regulatory reform, basically. Streamlining licensing, offering real financial incentives like production-linked subsidies to attract the private capital you need for mining and processing.
And recycling. E-waste is a huge issue.
Crucially important. The move towards a circular economy has to accelerate. India generates nearly 4 million metric tons of e-waste every year, but only about 10% is formally recycled.
Oh, only 10%.
Yes. So advanced recycling facilities are absolutely key, not just to cut import dependence, but to build a truly resilient domestic supply chain.
Okay, let's shift focus again. India's biotech sector. Incredible growth numbers, right? From maybe 500 startups in 2018 to over 10,000 projected next year.
Yeah, the surge is aiming for a $300 billion bioeconomy by 2030, and it builds on India's strength global leader in generics, in vaccines.
Supplying over 60% of global doses for some key immunizations.
And what's really interesting now is the rapid adoption of, well, deep tech AI startups like Medgenome using AI analytics to speed up drug discovery, refine diagnostics.
Putting India on the map for high-tech innovation there.
Absolutely. But that sheer number of companies, the quantitative growth, it masks some significant qualitative challenges that could undermine the whole thing.
Okay, those challenges. What's the big financial roadblock once startups get past that initial seed stage? People call it the valley of death.
That's precisely it. You see these headline figures, maybe $3 billion invested over 2 years, but the capital just dries up when companies need tens of millions for phase 2 clinical trials or to build their own expensive manufacturing facilities. The article gives a good hypothetical example. A promising Mumbai startup stalls a $15 million funding round. Why? Because international investors demand extensive, geographically diverse clinical validation.
Which the startup just can't afford or manage.
Exactly. Leads to value leakage. They might have to license out too early or just fold.
And fragmentation. Too many incubators, maybe not doing enough.
That's another big concern. The source mentions over 70 incubators, but few are actually equipped with the really specialized facilities needed, like pilot-scale purification systems or fill-and-finish suites.
So what are the priorities then? How do you fix this pipeline? Consolidate resources?
First, the focus needs to be deep, not just wide. Consolidate resources into robust clusters, like creating a GMP Commons in Genome Valley.
GMP Commons.
A shared good manufacturing practice facility. It pools expensive, specialized equipment, expert services, things individual startups could never afford alone.
Makes sense. And the funding gap?
Second priority. Bridging that gap needs a dedicated, maybe government-backed biotechnology fund. Perhaps using blended finance structures to pull in institutional capital, like pension funds. Offer partial guarantees to cushion the scientific risks involved.
What about streamlining the clinical testing? That hurdle for the Mumbai startup example.
Third priority. Establish late-phase trial hubs. The suggestion is a network of specialty centers within AIMS hospitals. Dedicated space, integrated electronic health records, exclusively for industry trials.
Speed things up, ensure data integrity.
Right. And finally, talent. A robust reverse brain drain initiative. Use incentives, tax holidays, SOC loans to attract world-class Indian talent back home to lead these efforts. It's paramount.
Okay, moving from domestic strategy to international infrastructure. Let's unpack the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, IS.
Ah, yes, the grand vision. Upgrading maritime links, high-speed trains from UAE ports through Saudi Arabia to Haifa port in Israel.
Plus clean hydrogen pipelines, digital cables.
Right. And its launch during the 2023 G20 happened in a uniquely favorable geopolitical moment. The optimism from the Abraham Accords, the I2U2 framework, India, Israel, UAE, US.
Building stable regional relationships.
Exactly. But obviously the deterioration in the security situation after the October 7th Hamas attacks, it's inevitably raised serious questions about IMEC's immediate feasibility. and the relationships between Israel and other partners in the region.
Beyond those immediate West Asia conflicts, the source brings up another competitor for IMEC, a long-term one, the Arctic route.
Indeed. Climate change is literally opening up new transport routes through the Arctic. Shorter transit times, lower costs.
Benefiting who mainly? U.S., Russia, China?
Primarily, yes. And this shift is creating real concern for Mediterranean nations. Countries like Italy, who rely heavily on the Suez Road, they see IMEC as vital, a platform to preserve their influence in global maritime trade against these rising northern routes.
So why does IMEC remain so strategically important for India, especially now, given all the turbulence?
Well, the EU is India's largest trade partner, over $136 billion in trade. Securing access to European markets via the Mediterranean is absolutely crucial.
And recent events highlight the risks of existing routes.
Exactly. The Houthi disruptions in the Red Sea forcing ships around the Cape of Good Hope. It just shows how unpredictable current sea lanes can be. IMEC offers something different, a resilient, multi-member initiative.
Not dependent on one single nation or choke point.
Right. It allows for innovative ways to amplify economic ties between India, West Asia, and Europe. Still very relevant despite the current challenges.
Okay, finally today, we're ending our deep dive looking at urban fiscal justice in India. And the material highlights just an astonishing statistic.
Which one is that?
Indian cities generate nearly two-thirds of the national GDP. Two-thirds. But they control less than 1% of the country's total tax revenue.
Less than 1%. That really raises the question. How did the engines of national growth lose this essential revenue? The source points to the GST introduction. After that, Indian cities lost nearly 19% of their own revenue sources. Things like octroi, entry taxes, traditional local lifelines.
Okay.
This just deepened their dependence on unpredictable grants from state and central governments. And the result is this. Peculiar inversion, the source calls it. Power is centralized, but responsibility for essential services is decentralized, pushed down onto resource-starved cities.
And the solution, often touted, is municipal bonds, but they seem to have very low credibility. Why aren't they attracting investment?
The whole credibility framework seems fundamentally skewed. Credit rating agencies often discount those regular grants and transfers from higher governments. They label them non-recurring income when looking at a city's balance sheet.
But they are recurring, aren't they?
The article calls this an ideological error. It argues these grants are legitimate entitlements, not charity. They're enshrined under the Constitution's 74th Amendment for local governance.
I see.
And furthermore, the relentless focus just on property tax is inadequate. It only captures maybe 20–25% of potential revenue, and it's unjust, pushing this user pays logic, turning public goods like sanitation, clean water into private commodities.
So what's the way forward then? How do you democratize this fiscal contract?
The suggestion is to learn from successful models, like the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Sweden, Norway. There, municipalities levy and collect income taxes directly.
Creates transparency, accountability.
Exactly. Direct link between citizens and local government. For India, it means reimagining fiscal federalism. Cities need predictable, untied revenues. And critically, shared taxes and grants need to be legally recognized as legitimate, trustworthy parts of city income. That's how you build strong balance sheets for credible municipal bonds.
What a dense set of sources today. We've seen how global power struggles, these giants reshaping the map, are forcing India to rethink everything from critical mineral supply chains to big foreign infrastructure goals like IM.
A lot of interconnected challenges.
But perhaps the biggest economic struggle we touched on is internal. If the cities generating two-thirds of India's wealth can't even control 1% of the tax revenue, what kind of ceiling are we placing on our own future growth, on our urban potential? That's definitely a question worth pondering long after this deep dive is over. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.